Hello, and welcome to the Success Showcase. I'm your host, Eric Lopkin with the Modern Observer Group. And with me, as always, is Chip Janiszewski from the Happiness and Success GPS. Chip, how you doing this week?
Doing well. How about you, Eric?
Doing well. It is now officially fall, and we've got some beautiful fall weather here in the Northeast. Although we're finally getting a lot of rain, which is good because we had a drought most of the summer.
Yeah, I actually have to cut the lawn. It's pretty so, but hopefully, our friends up in the Maritimes in Canada are recovering from the worst hurricane, I guess. Well, there wasn't a hurricane by the time it got there, but it did a whole lot of damage. And then we got our friends down in the southeastern part of the country are bracing for, what's coming up this week. So,
Yeah, it's a violent situation. We actually have hurricanes hitting Canada, Florida, and the Philippines all within a day of each other.
yep. And after a very, very quiet year before that. So, but that's what happens in September and October. So,
That's it. So, of course, our thoughts and prayers go out to all of them, as well as the folks in Puerto Rico who just got hit with a hurricane. Hopefully, recovery time will be quick.
yep. So,
So, today we're going to be talking about, we've actually discussed the book in the past, but we're going to talk about the principles behind the Go Giver series of business books. And these are fantastic books. There's a number of them. I actually just reread The Go Giver and finally read The Go Giver Leader, which follows up on it. And I think the real core behind these books is that we really need to be looking at how we can be service leaders.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've all heard the terms go-getters, and that's basically really a mantra as far as how people are measured, as far as whether I should hire this guy or that guy. It's, they're a real go-getter out there, and could be mean they get things done or they do this or they do that. But the methods with which they do that sometimes come back to bite them. And if all they're after is personal achievements and so on and so forth, and doing it for the wrong reason, eventually it's going to burn people out. And what this book does is it turns things 180 degrees around, and it talks about the go giver. And in many different ways, we've talked about giver's gain as far as B&I goes. We've talked about the law of attraction and things coming around and so on and so forth just by doing that. And everybody knows that when you are giving something and when you're working from your own positive mindset and your own passion and purpose and so on and so forth to benefit other people, it comes back to you tenfold, 50-fold, 100-fold. And the people that you're dealing with know that too. And being networkers like the two of us are too, the bottom line is selfless givers out there are the ones who get referred to other people without people even thinking about it, because they trust them right off the bat just because of who they are and what they're doing. So it's so important to understand what this is all about.
Yeah, there's a term that's been bandied about called servant leadership, and that's very much what this is about. And I know there's a lot of confusion around that phrase because it's not really about being a servant. It's about removing yourself from the interaction and doing what's in the best interest of the person you're working with. Because what happens is, as you serve them, as you provide them with what they need, it does come back. And it isn't, we've talked about the law of attraction, but it isn't necessarily about karma coming back. It's just people remember that you did this. And in turn, they want to help you.
Yeah, I mean, people are attracted to people who give. It basically is the difference between selfless and selfish. And if you are selfless, people are going to be selfless and wanting to give back to you also. I mean, that's just the way things work out. We talk about the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Those are principles that are exactly like that. We talk about the present moment, basically event plus response equals outcome. Your response is so important, and most people respond based upon their initial reaction, which is often negative. And what this is all about is throwing that negative reaction out and just back burnering it and figure out a way to make this positive. And so the most important thing here is to do that. So the first book, The Go-Giver, talks about the 5 stratospheric laws of success. And I'm just going to read them off and then we can go right through them. But the first one's the law of value, and then the law of compensation, the law of influence, the law of authenticity, and the law of receptivity. And a few of those, you can interpret them 180 degrees as to what they are really meant to be in this book. So starting with value, each of these stratospheric success laws has a quote that starts them off. And the law of value, the quote there says, your true worth is determined by how much more you give in value than you take in payment. Exceeds people's expectations. And if you give, it's not a strategy, it's a way of life. So it's how much you give in value rather than how much you take in payment. Understanding that by the law of attraction, the payment's going to come. But that's not your goal in this. And that's what this is all about.
Right. And this is something that, if you've taken any courses in customer service, you've heard this before. You need to be providing more in value. And in business, when you get caught up in the day to day, it's very difficult to keep this in mind. You're trying to balance the books, you're trying to make sure you've got cash flow, you're trying to make sure you've got a return on investment. But you really do need to expand your time frame to look at, yes, if I provide more in value now, how is that going to affect me down the road? And you're going to see it's going to bring you back more value in return as you do this. Because again, people remember that for what they paid you or for what they did for you, they got more. And that means they're going to keep coming back and they're going to do for you. And it's about building those relationships. And one of the things I love about the format of The Go Giver is that as the main character is learning these lessons, he's required to apply them the same day to somebody else, in essence, paying it forward.
Yes, I mean, what the book is all about is this gentleman, Joe, is meeting this master, Pindar, and Pindar's giving him his time out of the kindness of his heart and connecting with people and so on and so forth. But so every day for 5 days, he has lunch with somebody and learns what their principle is. But he has to go back and apply that and report back the very next day as to how that he did that. And some of these are very, very interesting in doing that. But that's, what this is all about is learning and then applying it and really becoming a best version of yourself. And, when it comes to clients and so on and so forth, the best way you can start by doing this is just listen to understand what their needs are, and then working towards using your talents and what you've learned towards applying that to them and going above and beyond what their expectations are, just because you are learning this and getting better.
Right. And it's not just about customers and clients. These principles also apply to friendships, to family. It's how you treat people. And
Yeah.
when you treat them better than you expect to be treated, the old golden rule, do unto others as others do unto you. This actually turns that around a little bit. You're doing unto others better than they do unto you, and it levels up. So when you do better, they do better, and then you do even better, and they do even better, and it helps everybody involved attain new levels.
Yeah. I mean, that just brought the analogy to me. Stratospheric success. What you were just talking about
Yep.
is going higher and higher and higher. And law number 2, the law of compensation, it says, and this one is a little bit tricky because compensation supposedly is getting paid for what you're doing and that kind of stuff. And it says your income is determined by how many people you serve and how well you serve them. So basically, what that's all about is just understanding that what you're doing for them is going to just trust that it's going to come back around to you in the form of compensation for what you're doing, but it could be in the form of them thanking you, referring you to other people, and a lot of other things. So as far as compensation goes, it talks about the three S's here. The three universal reasons for working. Number one is survive, to meet your basic needs, which is what most people do. And number two is save, to go beyond your basic needs and expand your life. And then number three is serve. And serve is to make a contribution to the world around you. And most people just spend their lives doing the first two. But people who genuinely successful people in all aspects of their life keep their total focus on the third, and that's service.
That's it. And it sounds, very confusing, but in its simplest terms, what the law of compensation is that the better you serve your customers, the more they will come back to buy from you and the more they will refer new customers to you. So your compensation is dependent on bringing in more business. And the best way to do this is to serve those customers best. And even when it's not a customer, when you're talking about an acquaintance, a friend, sometimes even a competitor, when if you know you can't do something for a client and you refer them to a competitor that can do it, that can come back and boost your compensation. And in fact, that does happen in the book. So it's all about how you can serve others better. And all of this becomes a lot easier to understand when you think of it in terms of customer service. When you get bad customer service from a business, do you want to go back to that business? Of course not. So the better you can serve your customers and clients, the more they'll come back, the higher your compensation goes.
Yes, and I mean you mentioned as far as competition and so on and so forth. What service is all about is you being a resource. So if you can't solve the problem, there are other people out there that can. And you and I both being in networking know we hear people complain all the time. There's too much competition at the meeting. There's 5 financial planners. Why should I go to this? And so on and so forth. And I always like to rebut, okay, is there the last customer in the world for a financial planner here today? Or have you ever worked with an insurance person and the insurance person refers you to somebody else because they can't cover what you're doing or somebody else does things better? We see so many examples of collaboration out there to make things better. And what your client and your customer, or even if they're not, will think about you if you look for the best solution to what they're doing. It just makes a world of difference. And that's what go giving is all about.
Yes, and what you said brings up a very important point. People tend to look at others as competition, and that holds you back. If you look at others, even those in your own business that work for other companies, as potential collaborators, it opens up an entire world. There is no one person, no one company that can do everything for their clients. So don't you want to have the resources to be able to tell your client, well, we don't do that. We're not going to be able to work with you on that, but let me introduce you to somebody who can, because they're going to remember that you introduced them and they're going to continue to do business with you on other things that you do well.
Yeah, it will always put you front of mind. I mean, that is an absolutely perfect segue into law number three, which is by doing this, you're influencing your client or your customer or anybody else who knows you to want to help you out too. And it's called the law of influence. Says your influence is determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests first. We just gave you an example of that. I do this, so does somebody else, but they do it better. Or I know somebody who can do that. That's really what it's so important. It says the last line here just says givers attract. And that's what influencing is all about.
Right.
Um, Talked about the law there. In influencing people, example is not the main thing, it is the only thing. And if you are known as a person that's just out there doing that by your example, rather than flaunting the fact that you're helping people out, people are automatically going to be attracted to you.
Absolutely. And you also have to look at this in a bigger context. It's not simply about doing business with people. It's about existing with people and being part of society with them. If you were listening to last week's podcast, both Chip and I recently lost people. Well, we've been networking for a long time. And when word got out that I had this loss, people reached out to me. People that, I wouldn't necessarily consider close friends, but these are people I know that I've done things for, that I've offered advice to, that know who I am. And they came running. They're like, oh, what can we do? What do you need? How can we help? And again, this was not a business situation, but these are people I knew from business networking. So you really do need, for all of these laws, to look at the bigger picture. And it's not just about having an income, it's about having an impact and knowing that when the time does come that you need help, and we all need help at some point, that there are people that will come to help you without you ever asking.
Yeah, and I mean, in this case, for both of us, it was just emotional support after what we were doing. But again, your influence is determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests first. And we've both been helping people out in a lot of different ways over a long, long period of time doing this. So obviously, the way people look at us because of what we're doing, that it's not that that's what we're trying to do or that's what we care about, but it's just because of who we are and what we're doing that these people come out of everywhere. And basically, it's in everybody. I mean, everybody has a go-giver in them. And what a lot of this is about is we're putting things in perspective for you folks out there, that if you take a look at these 5 laws of stratosphere of success and you become them yourself, you're going to be maybe successful, but you're going to turn into a wonderful person that is at peace with yourself and helping out a whole lot of people in a lot of different ways that you don't even know, because people talking about you are going to be talking about you to other people and so on and so forth. And you don't even know that's going on, but you are helping other people out just by what you're teaching people through your own influence.
Absolutely. And I think even more important than how other people are looking at you, when you do this, when you give more than you get, when you're there for other people, it doesn't just make you a better person, it gives you a better self image. You know, the first thing all of us need to do is to be able to look in the mirror and like the person that's looking back. And when you do this, it does boost your self image. It makes you feel good about yourself. And that in turn boosts your confidence. And when you have higher self confidence, you appear better to others. And it spirals. Again, going back to the term of stratospheric success, everything you do that we're talking about, these 5 laws, snow has a snowball effect. So the more you do it, the better it works, the more you get out of it, which makes it easier to do, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and this is a perfect segue into, I mean, basically what the goal is if you start becoming this yourself and you make this you, and it is in you, basically it's just pulling out in yourself what's already in there. And law number 4 is the law of authenticity. And the quote here says, the most valuable gift you have to offer is yourself. Now, it's human nature for us to go out there and compare ourselves to others and compare what other people do to what we do and figure that we don't stand up to them or measure up and that kind of thing. And if you're going to go into that situation and just have a little checklist as far as what you're good at and other people and so on and so forth, you're always going to concentrate on the things that are lacking in your life. The most important thing that you can possibly be is yourself. And the mantra right here is very, very simple. 2 words: be real. It says dynamic people talk with you and to you, not at you. So just be yourself. It says in the book that if you want people skills, then just be a person instead of everything to everybody and just, basically the selfless part of this is the most important thing. Unconditional giving, selfless.
Exactly. And it comes down to things as simple as a conversation. How many times are you involved in a conversation where instead of listening to what the other person is saying, you're trying to figure out what you're going to say next? Don't worry about what you're going to say next. Listen, because what they're saying will most often trigger what you're going to say next because you have that response. And there's never anything wrong with taking a moment after they finish talking to think about it and make your response. But you need to be yourself. We see it a lot, especially in sales, where people will put on a persona. And realistically, you'll go, the classic example is the used car salesman where you go to the lot and they put on this show and you never really trust the person. Well, the reason you're not trusting them is because they're not being authentic. They're putting on that show. It's okay to be yourself. You don't have to be self-conscious about it because, quite frankly, while you're worrying about the impression that you're making, everybody you're talking to is worrying about the impression they're making. They're not thinking about the impression you're making.
Yep.
So by being yourself, you put people at ease. And that's when you'll have really good conversations and you'll learn more about people. You'll learn more in general and create lasting relationships, which also goes back to when you give more, because from a lasting relationship, you're going to get more than a transactional relationship.
Yep. And basically, going back to law one, how much more you give in value than you take in payment. It's really, really important to just understand that everybody has this in them as far as being their authentic self. And their authentic self in everybody is good. And it's caring and it's listening and it's so on and so forth. And when you're talking with people, whether they are being themselves or whether they have their agenda that they're trying to push on you. The used car salesman, for instance, basically he just wants to talk, talk, talk. And if he doesn't really care about what's inside of you, what you're needing, and so on, you're going to see right through that person. And you'd rather deal with somebody that's got their interest more in you. And the best thing you can possibly do as far as authenticity, I mean, you talked about listening and not having your pre-rehearsed conversation there, regardless of what the person says and so on. If you can listen and let them control the conversation as far as their needs and everything else going on, then you authentically being your authenticity has their sincere interest in you because they know that you're caring about them regardless of what happens today. And that's the most important thing. And again, dynamic people talk with you and to you, not at you. And that's the important thing. Just go out there saying, I'm not going to be talking at people. I want to talk with people. And it always starts about understanding what that person wants to talk about.
Exactly. And there's nothing wrong with having things that you want to talk about, but you don't need to push them into a conversation. When they come up naturally, it's good to have that info in your back pocket. But if it doesn't come up naturally, you don't need to push it. Just follow the conversation.
Yeah, and that's where the influence comes in. Again, right out of the Dale Carnegie thing. If you ask questions and you get them to really come up with actually starting to talk about the features in that car or this or that or whatever without you even having to say it, that's really a fine art that you can develop just by being authentic yourself. Because if you do that from genuine interest, people are going to start doing it that way too. And I mean, you've heard of the term people selling themselves, and that's a natural result of that.
All right. So, and we have the fifth law.
Which is that's the toughest one for a lot of people. And this is the law of receptivity, because a lot of people, when they go through the first four, they become over humble and so on and so forth. And the fifth law says the key to effective giving is to stay open to receiving. Now, the receiving is obviously a natural result of giving. And every giving can only happen because it is also receiving. So it says the goal giver says that all giving in the world won't bring you success, or won't create the results you want unless you make yourself willing and able to receive it in like measure. And it's not like you have to shower thanks on people and so on and so forth, but it's okay to be very thankful and be very sincere with people when you're doing that, and go to that mirror the next morning and look at that person and say, hey, from here, from my heart, I know that I'm doing good for these people rather than getting a nice paycheck next week. That's what it's all about. But that's the toughest thing for people is they, you know, as much as they want to push their agendas from time to time, when something comes around that way, people really have a hard time receiving things.
They do. So many of us are brought up on the idea of self-reliance. But the fact of the matter is, nobody gets where they are alone. Whether it's family, teachers, friends, coworkers, customers, there's always people there helping us along. And we have to be willing to say, okay, yes, I can't do everything on my own. I don't need to do everything on my own. And I appreciate the people that help me out. And it really is a very difficult thing for a lot of people to accept. We all want to be the person that they come to for help. We want to be the hero to solve the problem. But we also need to be able to accept that there are things that others do better and be willing to let them do it.
Yeah. And basically, as far as receptivity, you got to give your away your insecurities over that. Because what it says here, we live in the culture that overemphasize independence and privacy, personal effort, and hard work. That's number one. But we also feel that we do not deserve what we have sometimes, and that's an insecurity. Being open to receive might mean that we are weak and vulnerable. And think about it. It's that's a true statement in a lot of ways. So it's really, really important to do that. To basically just learn from what's going on, accept people when they're coming to you and thanking you for your efforts, or talking about you in front of somebody else about all the different nice things that you've done, and you're sitting there saying, "Oh shucks," and that kind of, just soak it in and just be yourself and be genuinely thankful for that. That's part of being authentic. That's going to help you out with being receptive too.
Yes, it's one of the biggest misconceptions that people have, that accepting help or accepting gratitude makes you weak. And it's 180 degrees wrong. It makes you strong. Because again, there's an old saying, you can always do more standing on the shoulders of others. When people work together and collaborate, you can accomplish so much more, not just for the person you're collaborating with and yourself, but for other people that you can be serving. So you have to be open and say, yes, I'll accept help, I'll accept assistance. And when you do something good for somebody, accept their gratitude. We always talk about how gratitude is so important and you need to be grateful for what you have. But if you're not willing to accept gratitude from someone else, you're actually hindering their being grateful. And you don't want to do that.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at this, if you picture a circle with these five laws in there: value, compensation, influence, authenticity, and receptivity, you take out one of them and you just fall out of the circle and you got to start all over again. And you're just not going to be as effective. It really, really affects all four of those. And I think the other four are a little bit easier than that one, because, when it comes to the getting paid part and so on and so forth, people just think of that. Okay, I'm doing the wrong thing with the law of value because I'm getting paid for this kind of stuff. And that's wrong. Basically, you got to go to the law of receptivity and realize that you genuinely deserve to be getting what you're getting. And it's because of who you are and not because of what you did.
Exactly. And we are just about out of time. So, Chip, what do you think is the big takeaway for our listeners this week?
I would go out and get the book and just, if you want to download a PDF, You can just get the law of value, the law of compensation, law of influence, law of authenticity, and the law of receptivity. You can get that on a one pager. And if you take a look at that and start incorporating this into your life, magic's going to happen for you and it's going to happen for everybody that you come in contact with.
Yeah, and in terms of getting the book, I would actually recommend going beyond that. With most business series, people will read the first book and stop. But when you go further into the series, you're learning more and it becomes easier to internalize the lessons because you see more examples of how they work and it becomes simpler for you to move forward and go, oh, okay, this situation didn't really apply to me, but when I see it in another context, now I understand how it applies to me. So go beyond the first book and really accept that you need to be authentic, you need to be a servant leader, and you need to accept the gratitude and help of others to get further. And as Chip mentioned it as a circle, if you actually take a look at this idea in more of a three-dimensional term, it's an upward spiral. And each time you go around, you move up, and you gain more every time. And that's where it really pays off. Because again, the more you're giving, the more you're gaining, and the more you're able to give. And it keeps that spiral moving upwards and it keeps your success moving upwards.
And both of these books are very, very good listens on Audible, by the way. Sometimes it's better to
Yes,
listen things than to just read theory. These are it.
absolutely. You've been listening to the Success Showcase. You can catch every episode of Success Showcase at xvadio.com/podcasts, the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts. Remember, make this your best week ever and make next week even better. We'll see you next time.